best friends. I don't know if they think I'm their friend, but they're two of my best friends. Clint and Ben. Guys, introduce yourselves and let the people know how smart you are.
Yep, I'll start. I'm Ben DuBose. You can follow me on Twitter/X at Ben DuBose. I mostly cover the Rockets and the NBA, but I do a little bit of freelance coverage with MLB.com and a few other outlets as needed for the Astros. Consider myself a big fan when I'm not covering them. And above all else, I'm just overjoyed to watch yet another ALCS featuring the Astros. 7 in a row is absolutely ridiculous. So before we get into the matchup, I just want to start by saying we're blessed to be Astros fans during this time because boy, this is something decades from now. I'm sure we'll be thrilled just to see the Astros get to the ALCS once, let alone 7 straight years. So what an opportunity they have in front of them.
Correct. Clint.
And I'm Clint. With Larry on his side, I'm Clint TheScout. But on Twitter, you can find me at ClintEarl117. I'm a huge Astros fan. Obviously, I'm here. And like Ben, we just really need to be grateful for the amount of success that we're seeing from this organization right now. I mean, I guess you can put it in perspective. There's a lot of teams that are just now finally getting back to the ALCS after 10 or 8 years, whereas we've been in it for 7 consecutive. So we just have to enjoy that. And just anything that we can do to help you guys understand or kind of walk through this data, make sure you ask us, you hit us up on Twitter and give us a chance to talk you through it. And I'm just excited to get into it.
I think the best way to put it in perspective is that in 2015, when we almost got the All Texas LCS, but both the Astros and Rangers ended up losing in the decisive 5th game of their series. Since then, the Rangers have completely turned over to a new administration, a new era. Obviously, the free agency signings of guys like Corey Seager and Marcus Semien were the cherry on top of the sundae. Whereas the Astros, even though from a player standpoint, the only guys still here are Jose Altuve and Alex Bregman, of course, Lance McCullers Jr. as well, but he's not an active player right now. The fact is that iteration of the Astros, the sustainable model that Jeff Luhnow put together, I mean, quite frankly, that set the table, even if some of the players on the roster have largely turned over. I mean, you can look at guys like Kyle Tucker, who were in the system at that point. It's just remarkable that when you see these two teams, the Rangers have completely turned over to the point where it's sort of their first crack with this group, as opposed to the Astros. In some ways, it's still the foundation of which 2015 was the very start.
Right. The Astros, and let's do start there with the dynasty that we have. And I already called it a dynasty last year. I'm ready when this season's over with. I'm going back to the dynasty article I wrote a year ago, where I claimed that this is a great dynasty, one of the best in the 20 and 21st century, and like we do live in amazingly great times, and we do owe a lot to our former general manager and the things he put in place that we still are feeling. And so, like you said, Ben, we don't have all those. It's kind of amazing. We don't have all those players from the 2017 team, but those players kind of transitioned to the if you probably put 19 as the midpoint, we've got quite a few players from the 19 team, and the 19 team had quite a few players from the 17 team. So it's kind of through the whole stretch of 7 years of the ALCS, it's been remarkable. So let's talk about the Rangers and coming into this series. So I want I'm going to share this on the Rangers Facebook group that I have, and I want the Rangers fans to know I have no shade to throw on the Rangers for their team in 2023. Of all the folks on Astros Twitter, I have been constantly saying, like, don't count out the Rangers. Clint, when we talked at the beginning of the year, we said, man, this is going to be a tough division. And here we are, the two teams in the state of Texas. This is a wonderful period of time that this state has these two teams, and we are growing the rivalry even stronger. And I'm so excited. Ben, I interrupted you. You were going to say something.
I was just going to say that this year of all years is when I think you can add even more legitimacy to the dynasty. As far as I'm concerned, as soon as they got the second ring, it was a dynasty. But to see the Astros do what they did in a year in which you see the 100-plus win Braves and Orioles and Dodgers go out with relative ease, for the Astros to yet again find a way and survive that best of five. For me, I almost get a peace of mind because at least now in a best of seven, I'm not going to say the best team is guaranteed to win. Of course, that's not the case. Baseball takes a larger sample. The 2019 Washington Nationals were definitely not the better team. But I do think that at least there's a greater peace of mind that now you go into, a 7-game series and it's slightly less likely that just one bad break, one bad bounce, one bad call is going to decide it. I think there's going to be a much larger sample. Somebody's got to win 4 games. And so ultimately, when I look at this, I have a ton of respect for the Rangers. It's difficult for them, or it's difficult for an opponent to get 27 outs against them because of the way they can cumulatively stress your pitching staff 1 through 9, that lineup. But the flip side, when the Astros are healthy, and especially if Chas McCormick is getting back into form, which there were some indications late in that Twins series, I think, that he might be. I love the way he swung the bat in Game 4. Then the Astros can almost match them on the hitting side. And then with pitching, a lot of it's just going to come down, in my opinion, to health. Max Scherzer, it looks like he's going to be back, but is he going to be at a pitch count of 70, of 80? How deep can he get into the game? What are they going to do with the patchwork start? Some combination of Dane Dunning, Martin Perez, Andrew Heaney. So the Rangers can match the Astros in terms of the lineup. The pitching is a bit more questionable. Of course, you can also question from the Astros standpoint, what version of Framber Valdez are they going to get?
This is like 2 hitting titans against like 2 pitching teams that have had periods of, the Astros pitching was great in the first half of the year. Both those pitching staffs, as we will show as we get into this, were pretty terrible in the second half. And it's kind of amazing. Like both of them all of a sudden got healthy and the ALDS and their ALDSs. So,
and while it's a small sample, I do think we should note that the Rangers bullpen, everybody loves to rag on them on social media, but they actually have been pretty good in the playoffs to this point. Jose Leclerc, as a quasi-closer, has turned into a very good arm. He's been able to crank it up to 97, 98 in recent weeks, which makes his off-speed stuff a lot more playable as well. Aroldis Chapman, say what you will, but when he's good, and typically he's good when he's rested, and so if they can stay away from him on back-to-back days, then for the most part, Chapman is a high-leverage arm that you can trust. It's not as if they're as deep as the Astros, who have, of course, Neris, Abreu, and Presley, and you want to be able to trust, at least to some degree, guys like Phil Maton and Ryan Stanek as well. But the Rangers bullpen in recent weeks has not been the enormous liability that it has been for a lot of this season. So while I do think in general, if the game is close late, it's advantage Astros because even that improved Rangers bullpen is not as good, or it shouldn't be as good as Neris, Abreu, and Presley. It's not as much of a laughing stock as people on social media made it out to be during the year.
Right.
So I look at it as a pretty evenly matched series. And, one more guy I wanted to point out, Corey Bradford is a guy who looked really nice in that Orioles series when he came in that game too and pitched I want to say 3 or 4 innings in a row and got a lot of swing and miss. Cody Bradford, excuse me. He's someone who doesn't look great on paper. His stuff maxes out in the low to mid-90s, but he locates well. He's got a lead extension. So, again, nobody that's really a household name, but they've been serviceable. The one advantage I would give to the Astros in this series, and it's what gives me hope that, while I don't think it'll be a short series, that in 6 or 7 games they can pull this out. Larry, you've shown throughout this year how much better the Astros are against left-handed pitching.
Yeah,
and the Rangers
this is one of the keys.
Yes.
This is one of the keys. The Rangers
are very heavy with lefties. They're going to start Jordan Montgomery in
seven of their 13 pitchers on their ALCS roster are left-handers.
And at least
and probably 2 starting pitchers.
Yeah.
Unless they pull away from Heaney.
Yeah, you're going to have 2 of the first 5 games started by Jordan Montgomery. And even if that 4th game, in terms of, and I'm assuming that Scherzer is going to start. We'll see about the pitch count, but I'm assuming he'll give you at least 3 or 4 innings. That 4th game, even if Dane Dunning starts, it's probably going to be like a piggyback situation in which, you get a little bit of Dunning and then either Heaney or Martin Perez.
Right.
Yeah, and those 2 are lefties. So you're going to be facing a lot of lefties. And so the good news for the Astros is that based on the season as a whole, they handle left-handed pitching very well. It'll be interesting to see Sunday's game one because the Astros actually have not faced a lefty in a while. Minnesota only has the one Thielbar, who Jordan homered off in. Well, actually, no, they got Thielbar both times, so they haven't faced many lefties. But yeah, they got Jordan homered off his changeup in game one, and then game four, that was when they put him in for the lefty pocket. But then Abreu got him in the fourth inning, which
right, and I expect that to be a theme that we're going to play out. Let's run through some of these metrics. So we talked about the season metrics and how the two hitting teams have been great during the season, how they were even really, really good in their ALDSs. The pitching, how it was pretty average from a season wise, and yet both the teams stepped up in their ALDSs. Here's the team, and I gave you guys this data just because the way to actually kind of look at these two articles we're going to go through in a lot on the LarryTheGM site is if you guys will just consider them a building block. I give you guys the roster data as a building, and I give you guys xwOBA data that we're going to build out into a matchup tables that are going to be something you literally can have on your computer as you watch a game. I guarantee you, if you ever watch a game with the xwOBA tables that are in the next article here, you're never gonna want to. You're gonna say, Larry, can I have the xwOBA table for this matchup? You're gonna want it for every matchup. But this is the team. You can see the Astros and how they were good. And Jose Abreu, who has a negative numbers for the year, has been great late, and arguably, if not the MVP of the LDS. Second most valuable player in the LDS. And you see the Ranger lineup and how and just the thing about this, guys, red is good in these tables. So a batter that's good is red. And you can see how red these numbers are. You can also see there's almost no weak spot in the starting lineup for the Rangers. This is their lineup versus righties, and this is what I think their lineup will be versus lefties.
So,
and you can
Larry,
see how strong they are. Go ahead,
Larry. I've got a question for either you or Clint. I think this is a good place to start because obviously Jordan Montgomery is going to start game one. For the most part, we know what the Astros lineup, assuming health, is going to be. To me, the most interesting decision that Dusty Baker is going to have to make at least twice, we know Michael Brantley is not going to start against Jordan Montgomery. Dusty likes to give Brantley a day or two off in a series anyway because we know he's managing that shoulder, and Brantley from 2021 onward has not been good against lefties. So there's two configurations that you could go. You could go with Mauricio Dubon in center, Chaz in left, and Jordan as your DH. Or you can go with Chaz in center, Jordan in left, and Yainer Diaz as your DH. So ultimately the choice comes down to Dubon in center field and better defense versus Chaz in center field taking maybe a slight defensive hit because you're running Jordan in left, but then having more upside offensively because you start Yainer Diaz at DH. So the choice comes down to Dubon versus Diaz. And some people will push back. Rightfully so. The data, if you look strictly at production, Dubon has actually been better against lefties than Yainer has this year. However, there's also a lot of statistical evidence that I've read that suggests that Yainer has been a bit unlucky against lefties, and that he should be. He should be a little better than what the metrics show. So I think
Ben, this is why I focus on using the xwOBA data for these matchups, because the xwOBA data, guys, is based on, and I know you guys know this because you've talked to me and you've seen me reference it in multiple articles. But in the xwOBA data is based on the quality of the contact, of the exit velocity, the launch angle, and what the algorithms would say that expected batting average, that expected slug, what should have happened with these results. Was this a tremendous defensive play? And when you factor those in, you can see these numbers for Yainer Diaz. He's a 342 expected WOBA versus lefty player, which is way above what his real stats are, and a 324 for Dubon. So let's hold the specific question from against Montgomery, because we will get to the point where we will have Montgomery versus the Astros lineup. and then I think you'll be able to see it. But don't leave me before we cover that. So there
That's
we
fine.
are with the hitters, the pitching squads, and you guys. Each one of these pitching staffs have weaknesses in it, and even one of the weakest links in the Astros pitching staff is Jose Urquidy, who just pitched his butt off in the ALTS. So
Yeah.
there you go, Larry. Your numbers are irrelevant. But there you go. So how will the Astros attack a game 4 in the ALCS? I think they'll start Urquidy, but be ready for Hunter Brown and some of these other, a big usage of the bullpen in that game. And here's the stats for the Rangers. You can see they have weaknesses, including Haney and Dunning and Bradford. Both are weaknesses for them as well. And you can see how these teams match up. Again, understand where the expected Woban numbers are coming from, and then understand where I'm going to take them. As you compare these two lineups, basically you've got a top end of the lineup that's great for both teams. Jose Abreu is better than his grades, and you've got a Evan Carter that has been a revelation for the Rangers in the last 2 months of the season, and is arguably one of their
Yeah.
ALDS MVPs. And then yet their bottom of the lineup has been pretty bad in the second half of the season. So it's really interesting. The Rangers started off in the first half of the season 117 WRC plus, one of the best teams, and they cooled off significantly. The Astros were basically an average team in the first half, and they heated up as they got some more of Jordan and some of Brantley in the lineup. So,
By the way,
and the
one
pitch,
quick thing I want to note about that Rangers table that you have right there. I want to again underscore just how many lefties are on that
yes,
chart. We talked about their left-handed pitching. They also have a number of lefty batters, including most notably Corey Seager, who's the key to the entire operation. And many of
right,
the switch hitters, I think at least a
are
couple of them are
better.
better from the left-handed side. And so where that
They
could be
are.
important for the Astros, if you could tell me, and I know no one can, this is hypothetical, but if you could tell me that you were going to get the 2022 postseason version of Framber Valdez, I would take the
I would
Astros in a
be
heartbeat in this series.
right.
The question, of course, is whether we'll get that version because he's been extraordinarily inconsistent for about 3 months now. And the reasons why I've been talking about ad nauseum, he's adding more to velocity, but is that taking away from the overall movement of his pitches and making them more home run prone? We can
Clint's
go
been
back and
on
forth.
that one for over a
Yeah,
year, right,
yeah, we can
Clint?
talk about that all day. But what does give me a little bit of hope for Fromber, and I'm nervous because I do think some of this is mental at this point, but I do think that the fact that the Rangers are so dependent on lefties might be to his advantage. I know he's not Fromber, that is a huge lefty guy, but in terms of the splits, many of their hitters, including most notably Evan Carter, definitely are. And so because of that, it might be a better matchup for him as opposed to the Twins. The one thing about the Twins was that they could mix and match so much. Other than like Royce Lewis and Correa, they almost platoon their way through the entire lineup. And so the
Right.
biggest swing of game 2, the start that Fromber lost against the Twins, was Kyle Farmer, their platoon righty that they put in specifically for that matchup, and he got him. And then the other runs all came off the bat of Correa, who's a righty. As opposed to this, because the Rangers are a bit more reliant on true lefties, guys like Seager, Carter, Lowe, and even some of the switch guys, I think at least a couple of them are better from the left-handed side. That might give you a better chance at peak Fromber. That's me sort of hoping a little bit, but that's why one of those things. The Rangers are a better team than the Twins, but in some respects, they might be a slightly better matchup for the Astros simply due to how left-handed they are, not just with the pitching staff, but with the batters as well.
Well, this is where you can use this table, right? You got Jonah Heim right
Yep.
here, switch hitter, 342 versus lefties, 323 versus righties. So he's better versus lefties. Then you go down here to Tavares. He's better against lefties versus righties. Grossman, very much better versus lefties than righties. So you got two of the three are better versus lefties. And then you see a lot of red on both sides of this table, but you
Yep.
see this very dark blue. And Evan Carter, even in the minors, as I mentioned in the article that we'll get to before we're done, he was much better against righties in the minors as well before he came up this year. So this is a real interesting pocket right here in the Rangers lineup. If you have a right-handed pitcher starting, that these three in the middle are very prone to a lefty relief pitcher. What don't we have? We don't have a lefty relief pitcher. Maybe we do. So let's hold that before we're all done. All right, so guys, there's the tables, there's the pitchers, and again, this is a very interesting mix of red, which is great, orange, which is really good, and then some really disastrous purple and blue in the Astro staff. Similarly, in the second half, you see how much purple there's been in the Ranger staff, right? Notice how they look at the Astros in the ALDS. Like a bunch of great and then a bunch of three not so great. And one of the three that they say wasn't great was Urquidy. And that's because Urquidy was on the verge of disaster most of that start and gave up 2 home runs, right? So it's like, well, you have to understand what a FIP is. FIP is again built again on projection
expectancy
of what that expectancy, right? And so you understand. And the other interesting thing for me with this table on the Rangers, notice that there's only 8 pitchers that I really graded on their performance in the ALDS. They only really use 8 pitchers for more than these 2 lefties, Will Smith and Brooke Burke. They only use for 1/3 of an inning in the ALDS. They're going to use. They're going to bring. There's going to be swarms of lefties coming in on the pocket of the Astros lineup that goes from Alvarez to Tucker to Brantley, and that's why I actually think the Astros may put Abreu back in between Alvarez and Tucker, and they may put McCormick in between Tucker and Brantley. And they're gonna they go back to that 5 stretch, and that way they will the 2 righties in the middle of that. I mean, Alvarez and Tucker are good against lefties already, but if the Rangers feel compelled to bring left-handed relief pitchers against that pocket of 5, Alvarez and McCormick Abreu and McCormick may just feast on that.
Yeah.
Look
and
for that too, guys.
And I'll say quickly, because I got to hop off in about 5 minutes or so. I mentioned Fromber as sort of my key to the series on the pitching side because he's such a variable for the Astros right now, and he's going to start in all likelihood 2 of the first 6 games. Dusty did announce him as the Game 2 starter today, which would put him in line for Game 6, as shown on the chart. On the hitting side, the big variable for me is Chas McCormick. We talked a lot during the Twins series about the regression that Chas had in September. I think that played at least part of a role in the choice to have Dubon over him in Game 3. I do think there were clear positive signs from Chas in Game 4. He hit a couple of balls very hard. And then, as you mentioned, in this series, he's going to get some more favorable matchups with all those lefties. If you can get the version of Chas McCormick that the Astros had for 75 to 80% of this season, then that's going to make an enormous difference. If the lineup, instead of being 5-6 deep, we're talking about it being 7-8 deep. That's massive because we know how deep the Rangers lineup is, although, as you mentioned earlier, it has killed off the very bottom of it in recent weeks. If the Astros can truly be 7-8 deep with their lineup, I think that gives them potentially the upper hand in this series. And so if McCormick can build on what he did in that Game 4 and you get the version of Chas that you've had for most of 2023, then to me, that's a massive variable, especially because of all those lefties and the fact that they're going to have someone in all likelihood to break that up.
Yeah, so here's the pitching matchups I expect, guys, and we'll go back and change it if they're announced. But I expect Scherzer's going to pitch Game 3 against Javier, and I think they're going to do that because I think they're going to want to bring Scherzer back for a Game 7 because I think the 1-2-3 if Scherzer's their 3 is there's no. I don't feel like the Rangers have a great option for a 4th starting pitcher. I would say the same thing about the Astros for that respect. And we're hoping that Javier can be postseason Javier for that matter. And you can see the color coding here. There's a lot of difficult matchups here. This table is just giving you the data of how long these pitchers may last. But I want to get to, Ben, I want to answer your question before you go. So let's get into who should the Astros start versus Jordan Montgomery. All right, so taking all that data, Larry goes through the mathematical magic of giving you a matchup score of pitcher versus hitter. Okay, so
Mhm.
here's the Astros hitters, here's the Rangers pitcher, and you notice that Chas McCormick could be the MVP of Game 1 of this series, guys. Look at that. He's brightest red on this table. Why is that?
Wow.
Well, he's righty against Montgomery. And notice that Montgomery is a pretty neutralizing force against Alvarez and Tucker to the greater extent than we ever see, just because of the stuff that he throws. Okay. And I can go into the detail. We can take a step back at some point and I can show you guys that data. But this is where the data comes out. Now you notice that the answer to your question about Diaz versus Dubon, it just doesn't really matter. They're almost
Yeah.
exactly. This is statistically the
Well,
same score, guys.
which
As far
is
as which is the better matchup, it may come down to Dusty goes defense.
yeah.
I'm not going to crucify him for that, right?
Yeah,
Because
it may be. Yeah, if it's similar in terms of expected offense, then I think you go Dubon because it's not only Dubon in center, it's also the advantage of having Chaz in left instead of Jordan.
right,
Yeah.
and guys,
I was gonna say because it kind of you start to get into a nuance of if you're not gonna if you're not gonna have Brantley in the lineup game one, you start you let Jordan DH.
right,
That way you have room to work with that outfield position if you wanted to pinch hit Diaz
right,
in a situation or even Singleton or how that was
because
going to
yeah,
navigate
because
because you want to
notice
leave that. Yeah.
notice Diaz against some of these other pitchers like a Corey Bradford or a Dane Dunning or a Chris Stratton or a Martin Perez, right? These are red. I mean, just look for the red. That's all you got to do in these tables. Look for the red. Stay away from the blue, right?
Yeah,
And
and I would say with Montgomery in particular, one thing to keep in mind with him, he's a guy who has four, sometimes even five pitches that he can mix and match between in a given at bat or two. So a guy who takes a slightly more cerebral approach, that might be the way to go. And for Yiner, that's something he's still working on in terms of his
Yeah.
approach. So for a guy who feels like he can throw probably four pitches for strikes, that might be a little bit of a tough matchup for him. Even if we concede that Yiner struggles against lefties or probably small sample, a little unlucky, but this particular matchup's a little hard.
so notice another thing in this table. This is the shocking thing for me as I put this table together. Look at Martin Maldonado on this table versus the lefties. Martin is one of the
Mm.
best matchups against
Ooh.
against Montgomery. Okay, and that's because Martin has been hitting. I think it's the off-speed pitches. I think he's been hitting the junk really, really well versus left-handed pitchers this year.
Yep,
And
and that
Montgomery throws
passes.
quite a bit of that.
Yeah, and that passes the eye test because the strength of Montgomery is that he can mix and match a lot. The weakness is that he's not very high velo at all. You're
Right,
talking about someone
exactly.
who's 92, 93, 94 at the most. And we know Martin, especially at age 37 now, struggles with just to catch up with the super high fastballs. So yeah, in terms of hitting the junk and the mixing and matching, and I guess it plays into the fact that he's a catcher, and so he thinks, in many cases,
Right.
he's thinking through the same
He's
considerations
playing the
that the
game
pitcher
with
and
him.
catcher
Yeah.
are. Yeah, then maybe he's a good matchup for that. Yeah.
Yeah. So notice this table and how interesting these numbers and notice the Rangers pitchers that are really in trouble in this series, guys. Andrew Haney, Corey Bradford, and Martin Perez. Those are three long left-handed pitchers that this team has. That the Rangers really. I don't know how they get through a series without at least one of those guys stepping up and pitching some innings, right? And so
Right.
that's why they really need Scherzer. They need Scherzer in this series, and I'm not sure how long they can get him. But you notice that Scherzer is one of the best pitchers for them, and you notice that Chapman and Leclerc and Spores and Smith. Now, notice that Will Smith. Now, why is Will Smith so good? And he's lefty, and these other lefties suck. That's because you could go back to the article that we wrote about Will Smith, Clint, and remember what we said about Will Smith? That slider from Will Smith is deadly. And what did the Astros hitters hit worse than just about anything? A good slider. And that is where Will Smith is one of like I know no Astro fan is going to believe me, but if I told you there's a secret weapon in the Rangers bullpen, it could be Will
Mm.
Smith in this series.
Yeah, I love the fact though that he's not very confident because I agree in terms of pure stuff, he is a lot tougher on not just lefties but righties as well
Yeah.
when he's right. But I just think mentally it's been a rough couple of months from him, and so I think
Right.
it may be a deal where Bruce Bochy, even though the data shows that, it doesn't feel like Bochy has a ton of confidence. On that note, I got to hop off. I got an errand I got to run before the shop closes. Larry, thanks so much for having me. Look forward to reading the content throughout the
Thanks for
series.
jumping in, Ben.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thanks, Ben.
So we will continue. So here's the Astros the best Astros batters in this series: Alvarez, Tucker, McCormick. Shocker, Alvarez is number one on the table, but there he is, and you can see all the red. Given even what we said about Montgomery, he Alvarez could destroy some of the right-handed pitching in this series, and so notice these two. Think about this: it's the ninth inning. And the Astros have Altuve, Bregman, Alvarez, and Tucker coming up. Well, Altuve and Bregman are not a good matchup, but Alvarez and Tucker are completely deadly versus Leclerc. So just look for that. And this is also an interesting part of this puzzle. I don't know why that says left. I'll have to fix that. You're going to get Michael Brantley in here doing well, and just notice how good this table is with the lefties in the Astros lineup. All right, so what about the Rangers? All right, so I do want to point out, so the Astros versus the Rangers lineup, a 331 as we talked about, that's really good, but as we said, the Rangers versus the Astros pitching, even better, 347. And that's because this guy, Corey Seager, is going to be a problem. Just like, if you force me to say who's the MVP of the series, it's Corey Seager, guys. It's 419, and there's not a bad pitcher for Corey Seager in any of these games. A bad matchup for him in any of these games. And I don't sugarcoat things for you guys, but look at this pocket of pitchers. If the Astros get a lead late in these games, you've got Ryan Presley, Ryan Abreu, Hector Neris, and Phil Maton, all really good matchups versus this Ranger lineup. I mean, Maton, Abreu, and Presley are the three best pitchers on this whole table for the Astros. You can be strategic about putting Neris against the bottom of this lineup, and he'll destroy it with that split swinger fastball. You can be strategic about where you put Maton maybe in the top. Shocker, you may want to put Maton at the 1, 2, 3, 4 in this lineup. Assuming you started with the righty and that's the way it is, and just pitch around Corey Seager. But that just look for this, and this is why I say, when you have these tables and you understand who's strong against who, and how that plays out, it adds a whole another level of watching a baseball game. Like, okay, this is what they should be doing. Why aren't they doing that? Well, maybe they're thinking about something else later in the game. Clint, anything you had from these tables?
I think the biggest thing for me coming right out of the gate was the construction of how the Astros will put that lineup together to kind of force Bochy's hand to really evaluate what, is he going to bring in a lefty or a righty in certain situations, and really try to give some space. Because the way we've seen him roll it out right now, you can bring in not that it really matters. I mean, if you really look at the data, it's not really going to matter what you put in front of Jordan and Tucker in a few different ways. But I think with Tucker, one of the things that really got me was when I watched in that Twin series, is that ball low and away just really got to him. He just did not see that pitch well. But he's also not one of those prolific kind of guys that likes to go opposite field and drive the ball where it's pitched in that direction. And so I think there's little nuances like that are going to start coming into play. And then I know the Twins started to have a little bit more success towards Jordan at the end of that series. And so some of that some of the backdoor sliders, some of that action out there that gets Jordan really out in front and really starts to create issues for him. Because a lot of people will look at it and it's like, well, he's the best hitter in baseball. To an extent, yes, but also it's all about disrupting the timing. And when he's able to load and push off that front leg and lock out and then whip that bat through, if he catches it on the wrong timing, it's not going to matter. But I also think navigating Seager and Adolis Garcia is going to be huge, because you can't leave yourself. How would you pitch to those guys, especially when you look at Seager, Garver, and Garcia, and you can't really slouch around with Simeon either, depending on the situation.
Right.
So
you look at this table, right? And assuming we're talking about a right-handed pitcher, right?
Yep.
Well, Corey Seager, you need somebody who's got. I mean, this is why. I mean, you look at these numbers, and you're looking for somebody who throws a good changeup and a good split finger. Well, that sounds like Neris to me, right?
That sounds like Neris,
right? And so we'll see if that makes sense. And I mean, I know that Neris's fastball might get destroyed, but if Neris just says, "I'm not throwing any fastballs. I'm going to make you. I'm throwing nothing but split fingers, and I dare you to hit it." I'm not sure how good that part of the lineup would do against that Neris split finger.
Well,
now, guys,
I think it's the chess match,
Right. It's exactly guys, when I build these tables, I'm building them based on the normal distribution of pitches that pitcher throws, right? And that's why the patrons actually get a little special, a little deeper, right? They get the actual pitcher matches. Like, so let's go Hector Neris. Let's call up Hector Neris. Where is he? He's probably to the left. These are the actual tables behind that. Right. Let's just blow up Hector Neris. Right. So Hector Neris versus these pitchers. You see Hector Neris versus a right-handed pitcher, 72% fastball. Well, what if Hector Neris says, no, today I'm going 50% split finger fastballs, which is classified as an off-speed pitch. Well, you see the Hector Neris's off-speed pitch is a 293. That's a better pitch for Hector Neris than its fastball, right? And you put that, and I can show you. I can do this number right here, 50%, and I'm gonna make that 43%, right?
We're gonna say 43.7. Yeah, that'd give you the 100%.
Yeah. So you see these numbers, they drop, right? And so, but yeah, and that doesn't affect Corey Seager as a lefty. Ooh, okay, so
but
the point of this.
No, I was just gonna, and we may be about to say the same thing, Larry. But the point of it all is when you start to eliminate the trend of the data in terms of percentages of pitch count and allocating that across different hitters. Obviously, you change these expectations. It could be minor, it could be major, it could be any of that, but you put it into a culmination of it's a 7-game series. It's a it's a completely different scenario as to what it is in the regular season. And I think, Larry, you and I have always alluded to this, is like these guys are not playing the same game come postseason. Like what they were doing in the regular season is not going to be what they're going to do here.
Well,
and it's an anomaly at times, but I think it's just kind of like navigating that is going to be so much fun to watch, and people should be respectful of the Rangers, but also excited because this is going to be a really good matchup. I think it's really going to be fun.
This is why when I'm watching the game, I love to have this data in front of me, because I'm saying, okay, this batter's coming up. Hector Neris is on the mound. Well, I know this is his normal pitch distribution. I can't build a projection on anything else other than that, right? But, if Mitch Garver's coming up, I know he's going to get more than 22% of split fingers in that at bat. He may get 80%. He's throwing 5 pitches and 4 of them are going to be split fingers
Yeah.
because
And I
you
think
know
this
who else
also
knows
drives
this?
home where
Martin Maldonado knows this data,
Martin
right?
Maldonado knows this. Dusty should know
Martin
this.
I know. Well, I don't know if Dusty does, but I know Martin does. That's why I'm going
Oh,
to base it on that.
I said he should. He should know this. I'm sure it was in a
It's in a
binder given
memo.
to him somewhere.
It's a memo somewhere.
Maybe it was in an email that just never got read, but I think what other point to it, Larry, is it kind of reifies why you need to support and join the Patreon and be a part of it, because we want to be able to unlock all these layers. We want to be able to get more in depth. We want to be able to give everybody as much exposure to the data as possible, because the data really drives home results. And it's not always going to be 100% accurate, but that's the way that this game is played. Is it's not necessarily always on the field, and it's how pitchers approach hitters and vice versa. It's all about what they've learned from the data that dictates their approach. So that's why I would just reiterate, join it, be a part of it. That way you can get access to it front and center. And it also helps with our ability to start finding ways to get this data more interactive, real time, and really be a part of it, because
Right.
there's just so much we can learn as baseball people from what this information can tell us.
So here's the patrons. They have this data. They're ready to go for tomorrow, right? They have the data. You can see the tables I just showed you. They're filled with that. I want to talk about the secret weapon. All right. So this is data. This is an article that sits in the queue on the LarryTheGM website right now, because this is ALCS preview day on LarryTheGM. So you've gotten the first article we talked about, which was the ALCS guide. You got the second article, which has been the detailed matchups. Then the patrons have gotten this. We're doing the video right now. You're about to get this article, which is the secret weapon. And so let me take a step back. Why am I even talking about this secret weapon? So as we look through this lineup of Rangers hitters versus the Astros pitchers, they're terrorizing the right-handed. Their projections are not good for the Astros versus a bunch of these righties, especially this little pocket right here is a pocket that the right-handed pitchers where we could take a real advantage of them if we had a lefty going up against that. So what I would like the Astros to do. So number one, the Astros announced today, or maybe it was yesterday, that Kendall Graveman is not going to be available as the 13th pitcher. Both Ben, Clint, and I all agree we think the Astros are going to go with 13 pitchers. They went with 12 in the DS, which is normal in the shorter series.
In a 5-game. Yeah.
In a 5-game series where you got 7 days, 2 of them are off days, right? You don't need 13 pitchers for that. But in the 7-game series where 2 of those are off days, you're playing 3 games in a row. If you can get a strategic advantage with a pitcher in that grouping, you want to do it. There's not a lot of options for the Astros for a pitcher that can take advantage, except for Parker Machinsky. All right, so Parker Machinsky has only pitched 14 innings for the Astros this year. His ERA is 5.52. In the Pacific Coast League, however, his ERA was 2.84 over 31 innings. The Pacific Coast League, they average 6.1 runs a game. So a 2.84 ERA it's phenomenal relative to his peers. The bad news is Parker Machinsky in that time in the majors, his FIP was. I mean, I usually talk about FIP, right? His FIP was 7.28. That's even worse than the ERA. So why are you saying, Larry? What are you talking about? Like you should be going like Larry's going insane with this Parker Machinsky deal. Well, here's what Parker Machinsky's table is. All right, this is why it pays to get into the details with this data. Right, Parker Machinsky versus, and this is on the Patreon page. I actually will give everybody this table because I don't have any idea if we're going to see Parker Machinsky or not. The red zone in the Astros line and the Rangers line. Now, it's not. If the Astros do this, they may change the lineup and then take the zone away. But this is what they use in their ALDS. Their 5 through 7 hitters in all 3 games were Carter, Heim, and Nathaniel Lowe. And so,
I also think with that, Larry, sorry, I didn't mean it, not to interrupt, but like it kind of gives you that opportunity to look at that 6, 7, 8 pocket, but also that 9-1-2 pocket, even in a sense, if
yeah,
you kind of get in a little funky jam, because if you want to put Seager up against the lefty and you're
yeah,
kind of starting there,
that's
that
true.
gives you an option. So there's opportunity to get a little,
They're
not
good.
have to be so precise with him.
Remind me to go back to the other tables we've been showing, and so show that there's a picture that we actually can get Corey Seager down to 324. Okay, because I don't
Yeah.
think there's another. You might have a better idea there. I don't think there's a single Astros pitcher that Corey Seager matches 324 against. So why does he match 324? Well, because he's a left-handed hitter who has an expected WOBA of 295, which is below average, versus a breaking ball and then he's got 53 against the lefty. Against lefties, Parker Machinsky's fastball is a 244, which is great. Now that's not a great breaking ball, but you got weakness on weakness, and you got strength against strength, and it turns out that ends up at it basically. Now 324 is an above average hitter. Let's be clear. 319 is average, okay? But if you can turn Corey Seager into an average hitter relative to the rest, that's a win.
Yep.
But notice this pocket here. Evan Carter. Now, it's not a huge sample size. I even hesitate to talk too strongly about it. But this is a bad expected WOBA for Evan Carter. 121. That's miserable. And just so we're clear, they've avoided Evan Carter in the Rangers have avoided Evan Carter versus lefties through most of the time he's been up. He's played against a few, not many. And when he has, it's been like a lefty starter that they've put like 8th in the lineup or something. Like they buried him in the lineup. Well, this scenario, as you'll read in the article, is based on righty starting. So Verlander starts, or actually more likely Urquidy starts, or Javier starts. It's now it's the 5th or the 6th inning, and Javier's done what Javier does, and he's pitched like 87 pitches in 4 innings, and he's worked his way through, successfully. But you've got this pocket of Evan Carter, Jonah Heim, and Nathaniel Lowe. And I'll show you how he matches up relative to those in a minute. And Urquidy, same story. It's now the 5th or the 6th, and we got this group coming up. Well, the number against Heim is a pretty high number, but you've got 2 really good numbers there. And think about this for a minute. What the Rangers would possibly do if it's the 6th inning is they would pinch hit Robbie Grossman, who has a 383 versus Machinsky if you brought him in. If they do that, yes, you're taking you probably do this if you've got a 1 or 2 run lead. If they pinch it with, because if they bring in Robbie Grossman, then the Astros righties are going to take down Robbie Grossman if he ever comes up the rest of the game. And guys, I speak in absolutes, but I'm just telling you that's how the matchups would Robbie Grossman versus a right-handed pitcher is a different beast than Robbie Grossman versus a lefty. And so this is the game within the game. So you're sitting there and it's the 5th or 6th inning. Who do you want to face those 3 batters? Do you want Javier? Do you want Urquidy? Or do you want Muchinski? And the answer is you probably want Muchinski, because not only do you force them to make a decision about Evan Carter, you get Evan Carter potentially out of the game if they go put in Grossman for that, or you just it's like having Martin Maldonado up there versus the left versus Martin versus a righty, or Evan Carter versus a lefty. You know, that's the situation we're talking about, right? And so that you don't get too many of those against this Rangers lineup, right? And so you get through. You potentially use a Machinsky who like is on nobody's radar. I mean, I think, and I have to go read it. I don't know the description of the Athletic, but I think geez, I forgot his name. The Athletic writer, help me out, Clint.
Rosenthal?
No, for the Astros Athletic writer, the
Oh,
Astros beat writer. I
Chandler?
can't believe it. Yeah, Chandler Rome.
Yeah.
I think Chandler wrote about this. Like, hey, the Astros didn't win with no lefties in the ALDS, thinking they didn't need him, and part of that's probably because they think they can use. I mean, there's some reason for that, but this is a leverage case of like this is a you could use Parker Mushinski as a secret weapon in this very, very specific situation. And you bring up another one where you can go 9-1-2, and maybe you can take advantage of that as well. I think that what would happen there too is they may go pinch hit. So all right, what did I say? Let's go look at Corey Seager. Corey Seager there's not a 324. Look at that. Wow. If you got Parker Paczynski, that almost I gotta go check this data. Like, and the reason for that is Corey Seager hits righties really, really, really well, guys. And you know, Fromber says 368, but that matchup, I mean, we can call it up. Let's go get Fromber versus Corey Seager, right? And what's happening there is the weakest pitch for Corey Seager versus lefties. Fromber is throwing 90% fastballs of different types, and not very much of the breaking pitches. And so it's kind of surprising, right? Maybe I'll go check that and we'll figure it out. But that's what pulled out from the tables. So
it's been kind of it's been a different year of Fromber Valdez. That's the easiest way to say that. And
remember this includes cutters and sinkers. A sinker is classified as a fastball pitch, right? And so yeah, and that's why of course Seager's good
still
for
have that type of to still have that type of split between what is a very good a great pitch and the curveball to the fastball stuff is just it's kind of interesting. It's very interesting in my opinion. But like you said, I've kind of been on that for a while now as to what has been leading Fromber Valdez down a very weird path. But
yeah, like you've been saying for a while, like I don't like it when he's pitching 97, 98 miles an hour.
No, I'd
rather see 90. I'd rather see 94, 93, 94 because
I'd love to see 92
better.
to 94 and let the ball move and work towards that ground ball out. But anyways, we're gonna get back to the big apple right here, which is or not the Big Apple, obviously not. They're a little sad right now, but get back to the bigger thing at hand, which is this ALCS matchup.
Yeah, the big picture here. So putting it all together. Yeah. And guys, I know we got a few people here joined us in YouTube. Feel free to throw in some questions with us. We will be glad to answer those.
Yeah. The other thing I was gonna say, Larry, I thought was interesting was kind of that I was kind of alluding to it with Ben is when you kind of get in that fifth or sixth inning and say you've got Maldonado up, you pinch, John Singleton has some really interesting numbers against some of these hitters. There's kind of an opportunity if you're in a spot where you're really looking for a hit, you pinch hit Singleton, you bring in Diaz, you kind of lean more offense. Maybe that's something Dusty does if he finds himself a couple runs down.
Yeah, the
Or
challenging thing with Singleton's numbers right now is he's got like this weird reverse split in major league data, even in the xWOBA data, and like he's not been that guy in the minor leagues. So I I don't know if they I like, but the sample size is small, right? And so the Astros may have their own like we're good with. I think in general the Astros are really good with sending Singleton up there against a fastball throwing right-handed pitcher.
Mhm.
If that right-handed pitcher has a lot of like breaking pitches
Movement.
or off-speed pitches, they don't want to send them up there against that. Um, and so I think that's their strategy. Um, and so the interesting thing here is like pinch hitting. This is going to shock people. Pinch hitting Maldonado, given the number of left-handed pitchers in the Rangers bullpen,
Mhm.
and their closer's a lefty. I mean, he's not great against Chapman, but neither is Bregman, right? This is expected WOBA versus
Yeah.
Chapman's the same as Bregman, right? And so
Well, it might almost beg the question of why you wouldn't start Diaz and pinch hit Maldonado in the later innings when the bullpen comes up. I mean, there's some
there's
I'm
some
sure I'm,
there's some
I'm
weird
sure some
juju
people
going
say
on
that's
in this series.
there's some backwards thinking in that one, but
The
I mean,
left-hander, the Rangers have such a plethora of left-handed pitchers, and Maldonado has been really good against left-handed pitchers this year. That I this will be the one series that I don't hammer on Dusty about Dusty's normal mode of managing with Maldonado may work in this series because he may get some key hits late, and
yeah,
it's
and
kind of wild for me
to
to
me,
say.
it's like if you're gonna roll, if they do roll Evaldi out there game two, it's almost like I'm gonna let Diaz get his two ABs against Evaldi, and then see what happens and pitch hit Maldonado and move it. I mean, obviously that's not going to happen because Fromber's pitching, but I just think it kind of gives you some interesting things to really kind of think about, or things for everybody to kind of look at too when they're watching this. Um,
So
it's
Mark asked us in the chat, and this kind of goes back to
yeah.
the whole secret weapon discussion we just had. What do you make? I think he says make of Evan Carter as a
Mhm.
matchup. Well, he's a nightmare for most of the pitchers on the Astros if the numbers can be believed. But I mean, you can see in Fromber, he's. I don't think he's going to play the game that Fromber starts. Any of the games that Fromber starts, I don't think he'll be. I don't think he'll start. I think they'll start Grossman in those games. Um, so what what is interesting about it is, so Mark, I talked about the Astros. I think should put Parker Muchinski on this roster. He's a left-handed relief pitcher. Basically only for this section of the lineup of Carter, Hyman, and Lowe, and and you're about to see that on the website. It's in the patrons have it now. Why I call Parker Muchinski a potentially secret weapon that they could use against that pocket of the lineup. The If that doesn't happen, I mean, I guess you could go Hector. You could go. I mean, Hector Neris is even better against that pocket of the lineup, right? The point of bringing in Muchinski is almost to bait the Rangers into putting in Grossman to try to take advantage of the matchup. There's no reason to do that. Muchinski's not seen the game 7th, 8th, or 9th. if we're coming up to that part of the lineup. I mean, even if it was Garcia, Carter, Heim, I'm bringing in Hector Neris for that portion of the lineup. And that's how you can use this table, guys. Or you can just say we're going to pitch around him, and we're gonna ride with Abreu. I mean, we're riding with Presley and Abreu in the ninth, and we'll pitch around them. Because the hitters behind and the bench underneath, none of the if we've got Presley and Abreu facing the 6, 7, 8, 9 of this lineup, we should be good. And guys, don't hold me. Don't like Larry. You say we were going to shut them down. Like, I'm just saying that the statistics say we should be all right. Thoughts, Clint, as I take a drink.
No, I think it's very valid to look at that. A lot of this, in my opinion, would be, how valuable can Neris be? And in my opinion, I wouldn't let what happened with the Twins be.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want a lot of people to hold on to that and take stock in that, because he's known to do that at times. He did it with the Phillies before he got here, but at the same time, he's usually very good. So I think that that's going to be the direction that Dusty probably looks, if he's not going to bring Machinsky number one. But I actually think he might just look that direction regardless. With the way that
Yeah, I mean,
Dusty manages, it's just kind of built in for him.
well, the way the series
But
lines up, right? You
yeah,
literally could pitch. I mean, I think I wrote in the article, can we use Presley 5 times and Abreu 5 times in the series? I mean, the guys that the way these relative. I mean, look at these relative bottom lines of the way, and look at all the blue of Presley and Abreu relative to the rest of the other players in this lineup. And look at Phil Maton. I could see. I could see all 4 of those guys getting used heavily in the series, and just the way Dusty normally manages, and the way that Javier hasn't been going that long. I don't really know what we're doing for a Game 4 starter. I mean, you can say, well, Larry, we're going to Urquidy, but look at Urquidy. Look at Urquidy's matchups here, guys. I'm not making this stuff up. I'm not making this stuff up. Go ahead.
I guess the benefit of it will be is the Rangers will be in the exact same situation in Game 4. So then it's a matter of who can get the best out of who. And if you get lucky, great. If you don't, well, figure it out.
Yeah, so the Game 4 matchup, it's either Haney or Dunning, right? A 363 or 346 on their side. It's either Urquidy 355 or Brown 353. It's an opener concept, and ride the both.
Another thing that's going to come out if Scherzer really does pitch in Game 3 and he does come out and start, how valuable would it be for the Astros to jump on him and to find a way to get after him and force him out early? Because then that changes the Rangers' mentality altogether about having him go back out again, number one. But number two, it's going to be incredibly valuable to get some innings in on some of these guys and start exposing some of the weaknesses, like in is it Bradford and Dunning and start and try to really force the hand of Bochy to get into that. So I think that's the beauty of the 7-game series. It's the war of attrition, even more so now than it was that the Orioles dealt with in the in the ALDS.
Yeah, the more Bradford, the more Perez, the more Dunning we see. I mean, the more Haney we see. If we see a lot of those
I forgot about
pitchers,
Haney, sir.
Yeah, Haney. I mean, if we see the long left-handed pitchers from the Rangers, I mean, we see Brock, or we see Burke. These guys are all red for the Astros. That means the Astros should him. So Okay, so that's it. So Clint, what is your prediction for this series?
So I told my dad and brother earlier this morning, I believe the Astros win in 6.
That'd be
Um,
good.
my belief in this team is I firmly believe that they're gonna jump all over Nathan Eovaldi in game 2. I think game 1 is gonna be a very tight, contentious game. I would not expect. I would not be surprised if it's an 8-6.
Mm,
High scoring, a little bit of high scoring, a little bit of offense, and it kind of gets into a slugfest. But the Astros win because they can go to Abreu and Presley at the end to hold it down. I think they can get after Evaldi. I think that they kind of thrive in those moments when they get a chance to get after someone who's you know unbeatable, as MLB Network would say. They're
hmm
prime and ready to boast a lot of these guys on this Rangers roster, and so I think they take 2, and then I think they end up taking. I think they only end up taking 1 in Arlington, and then they can win it out in Game 6 here back home. But you know, I'm gonna lean on the fact that this team just has pedigree and just has the knowledge and has the ability to go out there and focus and turn into that extra gear. And the Rangers are walking into very uncharted waters for their guys, and it's really hard to understand what that pressure is and to put it in perspective. And I think we're leaning again. I'm going to say this right now, but I really think Jose Abreu is going to have a good series. I just something about the way that he's playing and his at bats, and he is hitting things hard, and he is swinging the bat really well at the most opportune time for this roster, and for this team, and I just think
right.
that he could end up being the biggest offensive game changer for them, and it just opens up some doors. And if I'm being particular, I really hope Diaz gets some more at bats. I know it's not hasn't been the best, but I think he has some situations in this lineup where he could actually be pretty dangerous to them. And pose a really big threat, especially against some velocity.
Yeah, I mean, the game that he should play is versus Evaldi. That's the
That's my thing.
4:33.
Like, I think
That's
you
the
give
game
him
he really should
Evaldi,
play.
and then if they bring in a lefty after Evaldi, then pitch hit Maldonado.
So
Yeah,
he's not going to. Unfortunately, he won't start that game because
I
Fromber's
know, I
pitching, right?
know, I know, I know,
But
but
but I mean, you could see them maybe saying, okay, well, Brantley played last night. We'll put Diaz in
we'll let
tonight.
Diaz DH. Yeah,
Yeah. So all
yeah.
right. So you think Astros in 6? I have Astros in 7. I uh, I I think the Astros take this first game because I just think the theme is the left-handed pitching is going to be a problem for the Rangers, and I don't they have so much of it they can't like really hide it too much, and so I think the Astros will get to Montgomery. Unlike you, I think that So what's interesting is both Uvalde and Montgomery have the same exact expected WOBA, but I think the Astros will get to Montgomery, and then they won't get to Uvalde. You think they're going to get to Uvalde. So I mean, one of us is going to be right. I mean, let's hope. And then I think Texas will take the Scherzer. I mean, the only question I have Scherzer is if Scherzer is Scherzer, he's a problem for the
Oh
for the
yeah.
Astros in the series. Now, I don't know how long you're going to get him though. I don't know what he's actually been doing behind the scenes, how stretched out he really is. I know he's in simulated games. I just don't know. I think game
And I
4
think
is a
that's
complete slugfest. I mean, like
yeah.
I think that whichever manager does a better job of, I mean, you could essentially go from like your Urquidy to Brown to France and just like let those guys eat that game because they're just it's a 13-11 game, right? And he's
Mhm.
like whatever. Then we're back on Verlander and Montgomery, and I think I said, well, maybe Montgomery gets that one at home.
Mhm.
Valdez is kind of. I think Valdez is kind of the key here. Can we get because the Rangers have? I mean, the Rangers are so left-handed on pitching. They're also very left-handed on hitting too. Can we get a Valdez that, and I think we will in one of these two games. One of these two starts, we're going to get vintage Framber Valdez. And that game, the Astros are winning.
And I think it's all about staying down in the zone, and I think he needs to throw the curveball more. He really needs to throw it more.
And maybe that's how maybe that's how he goes against the trend that he's had so far this year, and maybe that's how there's a surprise better performance for him. So yeah, because I mean
The
this
other thing I
matchup,
was
these
going to say there,
350s that the 350s and 360s for the, I mean, I was picking on the Rangers. Look at all the 350s and 360 pluses for the Astros in this table, right? And
yeah.
Framber's one of them. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
The other thing I was gonna say is, a lot of people we forget, the 7 game series, you got games 3, 4, and 5 all back to back to back.
Right.
That's a situation if the Astros can put some innings on some of these guys early. If Serger does pitch game 3, like I said, if they get after him early and you start forcing Bochy's hand to get some of these extended long relievers in there and start racking up some innings, that can pose a real problem for them in 4 and 5
Right.
because they're not going to be
Right.
able to turn it over to anybody until game 5 because unless you start pushing short rest on some of these guys, and
Right.
that's just a recipe for a lot of bad things that happen potentially.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting how the Rangers manage those 3 games in the middle, because if Max Scherzer can only give them 4 innings, so say,
And
how they
that's
go
also
from
kind of one
that
of those
to
things.
what I expect is a
Sorry, go ahead.
slugfest in game 4. Yeah, so we're going
Yeah,
from Scherzer for 4 innings in game 3, and I think he gets game 3. I was debating whether he gets 3 or 4, right? But
I almost think he would get game 2 because you
yeah,
get the day
maybe.
off. So if you have to run some good arms out there to win potentially, and then you get Evaldi coming out in game 3. And he
That may
helps with
be the
that
way to
long
do
relief
it.
forward. I don't know.
Because I just see
And
a likely heavy bullpen game in game 3, a heavy bullpen game in game 4, and then they're needing Jordan Montgomery to be everything he's been, and more in game 5. So it's really interesting, guys. This is going to be a great series. I hope if the Ranger fan watches this, they don't think we're just like, oh, there's a typical Astros fans. We're really not. I think this series is really, really close. I could see the Rangers teeing off on most of the Astros pitching in this series, and I can see, a couple of these Ranger pitchers just like I said, Max Scherzer could win this. He could be the. I mean, Max Scherzer is their secret weapon, although he's not very much secret. And if he comes in and he can give him 5 or 6 innings, that's a problem
if he gets through the
for the
lineup twice,
Astros.
that's a problem.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so I think it's really, really close, guys. And I thank you for those that have joined and those that are watching. I should have said this up front. I meant to, and now here we are, an hour and 13 minutes in. But um, please join, subscribe to the channel on YouTube. Please join the website. As Clint said, hey, if you really want the good stuff, come to Patreon, and you're gonna get. I guarantee you, if you have these tables that I showed you in Patreon, and you understand what they're showing you, and if you don't understand and you are a patron, reach out to me on Patreon, and I will definitely take the time to explain it to you. Okay. Um, if you have these tables and if you're a super baseball fan, you are going to want those kinds of tables for every game you watch in a baseball game, because it's like, man, this is giving me a knowledge of the game at a deeper level. I'm toying with the idea of maybe we'll do a watch live with Larry for one of these games, and we'll have those tables up, and we'll go through from there. But guys, join the Patreon. You'll get that kind of content. You'll get articles the day before or the night before. Most of the public does, and a lot of times. Um, so just I try to make it valuable for my patrons, because I really appreciate your support. Um, and then like the video, like this video too. I know we've gone long, but hey, hopefully it's been some good content for you. Mark, you asked
Yeah.
on the assumption that the Astros make the World Series, do you think the D-backs have a chance versus Philly to beat them? So Mark, my short answer is I haven't dug into it deep yet. I would be more scared of the Phillies just because they seem really, really hot right now. But at the same time, the D-backs did something to beat the Dodgers. Okay, so and the D-backs have some strength in their pitching that I just I'm at a point maybe different than all the other years of this dynastic run of the Astros. I am open. I can see a world where the Astros get swept or sweep any of these series because they have been so variable, so hot, so cold, so hot, so cold through this season that I think almost any result is possible. And so, last year at this point, I was really way more confident in the Astros than I am this year. And just because I just look the talent, the wild cards are like Jose Abreu. Like Jose Abreu's we've seen a Jose Abreu that hasn't been the Jose Abreu who's been the last month and a half all year long. He's playing like all-star Jose Abreu. If we have that, almost none of the stuff we talked about matters. Jose Abreu is going to be Jose Abreu of the 2020 Jose Abreu MVP year. He and Jordan Alvarez are good enough to the two of them to carry this team to the World Championship. So given all that, it's like I've been far less dogmatic about my oh, this is what's going to happen. Well, I just the Astros have been you haven't been there with the Astros to be able to say that. So that's kind of where I'm at. And, I'm open to the D-backs or the Phillies being a great series for them. And in short, we get to that point, I'll have similar data to what we have right now, and we'll be able to break it down.
How fitting would it be the second year in a row, the last series of the season matchup is the World Series matchup? It would
I know.
be quite the story, and I don't think MLB will be too happy about that, but
Yeah, it's like, well, who do we match with the Astros next year? Well, let's make sure they finish with somebody in the division. Let's give them the Oakland A's so that they're not going to be facing them in the World Series.
I just would like to chime in on that the D-backs and Phillies. I just think that it's an incredibly compelling story what's happening with Arizona right now. I think they just got it's young talent, it's fearless, and don't discredit anything that they could do because they walked into LA and put it to them. And I mean, they played them hard and they took control of that series. And I think that's going to be even more fun series to watch. As an Astros fan, I want the Astros to win it all, but also I'm going to be watching that one too because there's no way that will not be fun to watch those two teams go after it. So this is the best time of the year.
Yeah, I think we started at the beginning of the video. I mean, what's kind of remarkable about this year, and we'll shut down here in a minute. Like Clint, you called this in our season preview. Mm-hmm. You said the Astros. You shocked the world by saying the Astros were going to win 87 games. Somehow that would be good enough to win the division, and they would go to the World Series. I was like, well, Clint, how can a team that's going to win 87 games go to the World Series? And your answer to me was basically, Larry, none of these other teams, they're all going to have weaknesses. I don't know how you Nostradamusly predicted that. But here we are. Every great team in this postseason, like all the teams that had great season, they're all gone. All teams that had better records than the Astros are gone. And here we sit with there's 3 teams with the same record: us, the Rangers, and Philadelphia. And
Yep.
any of those teams could win. There's no like anyone should be sitting there saying, "Well, clearly the Phillies are going to win." Like, I don't know how
You could
anybody. I
easily
don't.
go to if Vegas were to go out there and give each team 25% chance to win right there at this point. I know that's the statistical, but without keeping
Right.
any variance, you would not be surprised at all because they've all played at such a high level.
Right, and they've all
and that
played at such a low level too.
and they've all played at such a low level at the same time.
Right.
But my basis for that determination was just the fact that you have one of the most postseason ready teams in Major League Baseball in the Astros organization. This is what they're built for. This is what they play for. The postseason benefits them with the day off in between on games, and it puts them in a position to think and have to perform at that high level. Like it's really hard to say because it's a really intangible thing to think about. There is no data to understand that. But when you look at this entire season, and this is how I walked into it thinking, I was like, what team in the American League is truly better than the Houston Astros? I didn't see any of them being better. Now they could have been better at the time. We've seen Seattle be better than them at moments. We've seen other teams be better than them at moments. But when the chips are down, this team seems to be better than everybody when it matters, and that's just something that's really hard to explain. And I don't it sounds arrogant, but it's just like I would rather bet my money on this team than I would take the chance of betting on someone who's never been there before.
Yeah, I bet the Mariners fans are all like,
And I'll be honest,
we could beat any of these teams. Like, what is going on? Can we get in
yeah,
because they probably could have beat all the teams and win the World
yeah,
Series, but they didn't make it. Which is okay. So I do want to say this because this is the thing that I know it's coming if the Astros win the World Series. Like Larry, you doubted this team. You doubted you harped on this little issue with Dusty and this little issue with Dusty and all this stuff, and none of it matters. I'm like, okay, guys, I have a completely opposite perspective. All of it mattered. It's just, and the reason I can tell you it all mattered is the Astros barely got into the postseason. They lose 2 more games or another team wins 2 more games. They're not in. Right? If the Rangers win and the Mariners win a
say they
couple
go
more games,
500 against the Rangers or something in
right?
that regular season, this isn't a discussion. We're not on this recording right now. We're
Right. We're the Seattle Mariners.
yeah.
We're the Mariners fans sitting thinking we had the best team and we didn't get in. And
It's also the point, Larry, where it's like, and not to cut you off, but I want to support you in that thing is it's not so much harping on the team or harping on Dusty. It's just sometimes there's moves that are made that just kind of
don't
do
make any
not
sense.
make sense from a baseball perspective. Like, so case in point, what was it, game 2 against the Twins? And I think it was the 5th inning, and Maldonado's at the plate. Fromber's not in anymore. You have a runner on first, or you have Pena's on first, right? He got the hit, and then Martin Maldonado comes up with no outs, and Martin Maldonado's swinging the bat. Why is he not bunting and laying it down, moving the guy into scoring position for the top of the lineup to come around? It was only 3-0 at the time, if I'm not mistaken. There was still opportunity to get back into that game.
Right.
But
Yeah.
yet, where was the logic there?
Right.
So
Right.
when we bring up these things all throughout the season, it should be magnified to you guys when you see it in the postseason, because these are the little decisions that end up costing you a win in the postseason, and you only have 5 games. It's not 162 anymore. Sorry, Larry, I'm on a rant, but I'm just saying, like, there's an important value to this thing, to this.
Right. And so let's hope, and there's something else we've said also, is that Dusty has a playoff mode that he manages different in the playoffs than he does in the regular season in general. I mean, he doesn't. I mean, to be fair and to give Dusty credit, I think you could make the argument the Astros do as well as they do in the postseason because they are more rested than most of the other teams. in regular season. That's the positive spin. Okay, I will be charitable to that extent because but I don't really know that the Atlanta Braves failed or the Dodgers failed or the Tampa Bay Rays failed or the Baltimore Orioles failed because their players played too much. I mean, I think the Rays were beset with such a horrendous level of injuries that they they I didn't really know how to handicap the Rays, although I just didn't want to play them. And one could argue the same thing for the Dodgers. They were beset with so many injuries that they were on their third string and in some spots as well. So the point being is that here we are. The Astros are on the precipice of the ALCS once again. 7 years. The dynasty continues. This is where we belong until we don't. And um, we've somehow been able to turn a 90 and 72 win season into this. And I've wondered, I was wondering if we ended up going up against the Dodgers or the Braves, if we would be if we would be essentially what the Braves were to us in 21, or the Nationals were to us in 19. The team that really gets barely got in, and or a heavy underdog to the behemoth in the other league. Well, that dynamic's not existing. There's, like you said, there's no super team left. They're all good. They're all they one could argue they're all kind of peaking, although the Rangers probably peaked in May. Um,
I would
and
also say
and
that they're all
maybe
kind of built similar.
yeah. And so
They're all kind of built with great two or three really good, great starting pitchers, two or three really good relievers, and then they're very top heavy. The Phillies, I feel like, are top
mhm,
heavy. The Astros are obviously top heavy, and even the even the Rangers are top heavy in their lineup. And then the Diamondbacks are the only wild card because I don't know that much about them besides Zach Gallen being a stud
yeah.
and Corbin Carroll being a stud. Just kind of like
Yeah.
walking through that, but um, yeah, sorry to cut you off there. I was just saying, like, they're all
No,
kind
that's
of
good.
built
That's good.
similarly.
All right, so guys, we are going to shut it there. You gave you an
And
hour and
I'll make
28
one
minutes.
point, Larry,
Yeah.
just to say, a lot of people forget the 106 win Astros who kind of set this whole thing up because we've heard that excuse of, oh, well, the Braves had too much time off. You had too much time off. This Astros team is unique because even when the games don't matter, they turn it on in the postseason.
Right.
Every game matters for the Astros to the very end, and now they've maintained that level of intensity. I think it makes a difference, but I also think it's all about what you have and what you don't have in that clubhouse. And there's something that we don't know that's happening there, and I want to reiterate that because I think a lot of people are bringing a lot of a lot of unfair. At least not giving the credit where credit's due to some of these teams for beating teams like the Braves and the Dodgers,
Mhm.
and that's just this is what happens, and I just really like the Astros' chances.
Right. I mean, baseball playoffs are a crapshoot, and here we are. Here we are, and hoping that we're able to beat the odds. And so let's go Astros. Um, so Clint says Astros in 6. I say Astros in 7. We're going. If we're right, we're going back to the World Series, and you know, I'm just gonna think like, man, I said like 2 months ago, there's no way this team's gonna win the World Series. Well, I guess I'm gonna say like, well, we're not the same team we were 2 months ago. When I said that, there were some issues that have been resolved, mainly on Jose Abreu, um,
Yeah.
and and so let's just we will drive and hope for the best, and let's go Astros, and thank you guys for joining us, and please again
Or,
subscribe to the channel, like the video, subscribe to the website, and join the Patreon group. $5 a month, and I try to make it worth every penny.
and if you want to talk about it, if you want to know anything else, just reach out to us and let us be there to talk you through it and give you our feedback. And I appreciate it, Larry. I got a little long winded, more than normal, but I appreciate the patience.
Hey, it's all right. All right, thanks guys. Have a good day. Bye bye.